Very honored to have John Argo with us. John, I think we met 5 years ago, 4 years ago. We were fortunate enough to go to a soccer game with Brian Sheffield, and the rest of the night has been sworn to secrecy. So it was one of those nights. But I don't think I've actually heard all of your background and how you got to Continental. So kind of introduce yourself and walk me through how you got there.
Sure thing. Well, thank you for having me. First off, this is a cool venue, cool facility you guys have built up here, and I love the energy in the room. And I had a chance to sit and hear some of the earlier conversations, and you can just tell how forward you guys are at Collide. And I've known you guys for a little bit now. So, but yeah, Chuck, that was a fun night. So I'm first generation oil field. My parents, my dad's a welder. My mom's a school teacher from Norman, Oklahoma. So. Third generation Sooner, not probably as many in this room. Really proud that my son, my oldest, is a freshman at OU this year, so we got the fourth generation there today. I had no background in oil and gas, no background in energy, and actually, I've made my first maybe post on Collide, so calling on if I get any watts on that today. There was a note that came across my email that said, who's somebody who's influenced you in your life? And so I was like, I gotta highlight this. There's a gentleman named Bill Reed that was so kind to me. My dad had done some work for him. I think he had done some different awning work and some stuff around his pool fence, et cetera. Anyways, Bill was a very successful geologist. And my dad, whenever I was trying to get scholarships for college, didn't get as much as I was hoping on just the typical scholarships. There was this petroleum engineering scholarship. This kind of turn of the century, 25 years ago. And if you all around in that time, this is terrible oil and gas, right? The commodity prices suck. This is not an encouraging environment to step into petroleum engineering. But so we were looking, my dad asked, hey, who do I know that can maybe give my son some guidance? Should he try to go and pursue this scholarship? And Bill was one of those gentlemen that was so kind to me that encouraged me to join the field. And anyways, so that's my post on Collide. But I'll say that got me into it. Scholarship dollars, the generosity of this industry in oil and gas and energy. Had a great career or education at University of Oklahoma Petroleum Engineering. Came out of college, worked for Dominion E&P. For those who don't remember Dominion, in 2005, when I started Dominion, we had more rigs running in Dominion in the lower 48 than anybody else in the country. Now, this is vertical days, right? We had 100 rigs running out of Oklahoma City office alone. The parent company, Dominion Resources, decided to sell. They sold that company. I followed those assets to a company called Hamm E&P, Lowe's Corporation. If you guys know, not the Lowe's Home Depot Lowe's, but the Lowe's called small Berkshire Hathaway Lowe's. They own a number of different things, including Boardwalk Pipeline, Diamond Offshore Drilling. They may have sold that at this point. Lowe's Hotels. Have you ever seen Lowe's Hotels? If you want to talk a fun story at happy hour, how those guys became billionaires, really cool story. And then they bought us as a wholly owned subsidiary, Hamm E&P. Worked Hamm until that parent company decided to monetize in 2014, sold to Intervest, and then I had the chance to be a part of the sales team on that, which was really fun. I'd been not really anything deal related to that point in my career. I had drilling, completions, production, operations, budget planning, but not reservoir, but not deal side. Got the bug for that a little bit, was getting my MBA at the time, ended up getting coming to work for Continental Resources to run the technical side of business development back in 2014. Jose Bayardo, if anyone knows Jose, he's the leader at NOV these days, but Jose was a phenomenal leader that took me in, and I learned a lot from him. And then ultimately, because he decided to go take a job at NOV, I had the chance to kind of step into leadership in BD early on. Did that for about 8 years at Continental, and then the past couple of years been running our Williston Basin asset.
That's cool. And I promise I did not prompt Sharon to bring up safety. But tell us about the LifesAIver initiative, because I think this is one of the coolest things I've heard of us doing as an industry. And I think this is your baby.
Well, mine and others. I'm glad she mentioned it, and I'm glad that previous conversation was talking about if we can provide something that works, they'll use it, right? But yeah, that was a great segue to this conversation. So I've, once again, haven't been in operations. Rewind about a year and a half ago. Hadn't been in ops for about a decade. More reservoir, corporate roles. Had the chance to see the Wilson, for example, at a very high level and all the different deals, but hadn't really been living it. Now I'm in my operational leadership role. I'm sure other operations teams do the same thing. We try to take every potential incident very seriously. We use the term SIF, right? Significant injury or fatality. Whether it happened or not, the fact that it could have is what matters, right? How do we prevent those? We review all those every month at Continental. So our 4 basins, a lot going on, over 50 workover rigs running. We'll talk workover for a second across the company. And every potential incident like that, we review. Unfortunately, I would tell you that almost every month after we reviewed those conversations, we review those incidents, root cause, corrective action, what do we do different? You kind of get past the formality of it, and then the conversation kind of starts. And somebody will always say this, every meeting I've been in, every single month for 12 months. That same thing happened in Anadarko 2 years ago. That same thing happened in the Powder River by a different operator last month. That same thing got somebody killed in the Permian 5 years ago. We're not, this isn't my words, from somebody who's got much more office experience than me, we're not inventing new ways to hurt people in our industry, probably all industries. But that tribal knowledge you guys talked about a minute ago and how much that you lose, but not even that. How many people are coming into the industry that just have no background, have no exposure to it? They haven't done that job before, right? There's the risk. Or maybe even worse, the individual who's done it 100 times and now complacency sets in. The conversation that we had earlier talking about what's specific to the well, that's part of the power of what we're talking about private LifesAIver. So that's the background, is how can we do better? Data is so abundant these days, and we're better at utilizing it, as you guys know really well, and you guys are doing it already at this company. What can we do with data? And is there a way that we can leverage that information? And someone came up with this term, which I loved. Instead of artificial intelligence, artificial experience, right? Can you imagine, before we go on, we used workovers for Project LifesAIver. This was the thesis, this was the idea, this was the ask. Can we have, before any crew shows up on that location, there's 20 or 30 of us right here? Imagine 5 or 6 of us were that crew on a workover operation. And before we show up on the location, what if that tool could take all the knowledge that has ever been documented on workover operations, well information, weather information, rig information, preventative maintenance, lack thereof, you name it, and it could take that job we were doing specific to that well, to that rig, to that crew, to that environment, and highlight to us, as you were saying, Sharon, is it Sharon? You were saying earlier, what if it was just specific to that, and it could guide, these are the 5 things, these are whatever it is that's most critical for you to be focused on, and if you can focus on that and eliminate that risk, that's going to save a life, that's going to save a potential SIF. That was the idea.
And how is it done today, kind of pre-AI, and what are you thinking AI is possibly going to be able to do for it?
I think that today, there's a lot of effort that goes into it, obviously, right? But the reality of today, and we started with workovers for a reason, there's more workover rigs running than drilling rigs or frac crews by far. There's more money and automation and technology poured into drilling rigs and to completion crews by far, right? Think about the millions of dollars that all of us as operators sign on any one of those invoices, right? There's a lot of potential value that goes along with it. Workover operations is a lower margin part of our business. It's a disparate workforce. Sometimes you've got 2 or 3 languages on the crew on location. There's all those challenges. So I would say, I'm sure every company does it as best they possibly can, both those great workover operators as well as those operating, E&Ps that they're working on behalf. But the reality just is the challenge is high. So I think that, today everyone has their form of a JSA, a pre-job safety meeting. They're trying. But I'll tell you, that when I go out to a location, very rarely do I ever hear from any of the crew members on a workover rig that they know anything about that well itself. They've been very versed in the job they're doing. They know their rig, they know their crew, but what about the well itself? So think about the amount of information. The last 5 times that we pulled rods on this well, the last 5 times we pulled rods on wells analogous to this well, the last 5 times that we use this, whatever it may be, that typically is not part of what they're getting access to. What if you have that? What if that is there at their fingertips? What if that's ahead of the actual job itself? The wisdom of every 35, 40-year hand that's the best in workovers is now not just maybe on that location, but everyone that's ever done it is on that location.
Yeah, it's interesting because if you think through that, that's actually a great application for AI. It takes a lot of information distills it down, pulls that out. Think through other things. I mean, what's the weather like today? Is it windy today? Is that going to be a cause? And so there's just a lot of stuff that needs to be integrated to make that JSA dynamic, I think. And so it's a great idea. I think the time is right to do something there. The thing I'm most impressed by is how in God's name did you get 6 companies? Who are they? And how did you get 6 companies to come together to share in all that?
Great question. I think, so I'll start with, we're a competitive industry, right? There's a lot at stake. There's a lot of value in this industry, and that's why we're so competitive. And historically in this industry, that competitive advantage is what makes the greats maybe versus those that don't do as great. At Continental, we're almost 60 years old. I'm proud to have been there for 11 years now. Our core values: safety, honesty, integrity, fierce competition, teamwork. Fierce competition, I don't know if anybody else in this room has that as part of their core values. I love that we have it as a core value. I want to win in all that we do. It hinders our ability to share, right? There's a reason why there's companies that make lots of money that take information from operators and then feed it back to them for a fee. Fierce competition does not apply to safety. None of us are better off by not sharing best practices in safety. None of us win if somebody goes home in the less condition than they left their family that morning to be on one of our locations or be involved in our industry. And so many things are done so well. As you guys know, like, we're one of the safest industries in the world. And there's so many men and women that make that happen. So I don't want to paint this as we're not doing great things already. We are. But if we can do anything to even impact one potential future incident, future fatality, if that's removed, it's all worth it, right? 100% worth it. So how do we get us? That was the way we were able to get everybody to work together. So we had the idea. We were actually on a plane up to North Dakota, myself and Eli Shepard, one of our HSE directors, and we were having this conversation, like, how do we do this better? And there's a number of different things that had already been building blocks of some of the collaboration on safety initiatives from large operators. Onshore Safety Alliance has been around for a while. We ultimately started with that, went with what we thought was the group that could be the most, call it, fast moving. We didn't want to slow down, because every day we waited on this, we felt like we were potentially losing the opportunity to help eliminate a risk. So Continental, Oventive, BPX, Cord Energy, Key, and Ranger. So you've got 2 very large workover operators that have the knowledge of all their rigs across the country, and you've got call it 4 large-sized independents that ultimately have a lot of information and a lot of vested interest in, can we make this better?
And you didn't tell the general counsel? I mean, how did that go down?
We so great point. We knew that right out the bat that was going to be a potential opportunity we had to overcome, or challenge we had to overcome. So really, the groups of all 6 of these companies that were engaged, we had operational leadership, safety leadership, technology leadership, and counsel. So you get those 4 leaders, decision makers, on every call, on every conversation. How can we do this? And I think that, I've got unreasonable expectations. Ask anybody who works with me or on my team. I think things get done really fast, and I don't understand why it shouldn't be done fast. We didn't get this done as fast as I would have initially asked, but I would say from the conversations we had with those companies to the event we had last week at the Hamm Institute for American Energy in Oklahoma City, essentially, we can talk about the competition we put together, but from that point, it was about 4.5 months.
So walk us through the competition, because I think this was really cool.
So somebody was saying earlier that, inside oil and gas companies, operators specifically, there's a lot of things we do really well. We are not AI companies. We are not technology. We are not app developers. I'm not taking anything away from companies that have done that. We've done that at Continental. We have some great individuals, very talented, that do build internal applications, build internal tools, and some of these things are industry leading for sure. But in general, that's not what we do. So the question that we asked was, can we not take all of our collective information, our collective shared mission, and then put that out to those that we are aware of or we know of or we've been recommended towards, best technology AI companies that can do this? We did stack hands early on that we didn't think this was a fit for just somebody that's AI whatever, that has no ties to energy. As everyone in this room knows, like, there is context that matters in our industry and our information, our data. You said earlier, someone said 95% of all operational knowledge is not put on paper. You got to have some tribal knowledge, some connection to the industry. And hopefully then on top of that, you're better off there, but also the passion for the mission that you want to help safety in this industry. So what we did was we asked all those companies, who do you recommend? And we essentially had a list. I won't go to how many there were, but there were a lot initial screened. We then had different levels of screening. We then had conversations, as you know, Chuck, with your team as one of them, and ultimately got down to a finalist group that everybody felt really confident could be somebody who could do this and do this well. We then had those final 6 AI technology companies, gave them access to, I've got BD background, right? So we had a VDR, we had all our information, we had the, call it Q&A session, whatever you want. We also opened up, because we thought it was so critical for everyone involved to really see the actual end product, talk to the team members, talk to the crews that would be potentially utilizing this. So we hosted an event or a few days of tours up in North Dakota. So those team members, those technology companies went up there to Dickinson, Killdeer area, had a chance to get out on multiple workover rigs. So thanks to Cord for helping us out, Indy Energy, Ranger, Continental, we're all supportive of that. And then ultimately through those conversations, each one of those companies had something more tangible, had time actually talking to the crews working that, and also the safety leadership, operational leadership from Continental and from Cord as well. Brought that back, and ultimately last week, once again, had a chance to present their built applications. Every company likes to say how fast they can do this, so we put them to the test. They had, 4 weeks to put it all together, and they did, and they presented, and we were really, really pleased and impressed. Great conversation. Once again, Hamm Institute was phenomenal at hosting that. You can speak to what you thought about it. I'd love your thoughts as well.
Oh, the Hamm Institute was really cool, because I've gone to Oklahoma City multiple times, driven by it, but I'd never been inside. Really cool building, neat thing. I thought the day was amazing. This was kind of Shark Tank on steroids for me, if you will, because each group got up there and presented. If we'd have had our vote, everybody would have been able to see every presentation, but that's just a gentle jab at you. So anyway, everybody made their presentations, and I think the cool thing, though, was had a happy hour afterwards, got to interact with everybody involved and hear feedback. So I thought that was really good. You've kind of sat there, you guys are going through making a decision. I won't give a commercial for us, but what do you think the product's going to look like? You know, what do you think kind of version 1's going to do?
I think it was said earlier, someone asked, like you asked with the pumper bot or whatever you referred to, like, will they use it? And what was your answer? If it's useful. So the number one thing has to be, and I think almost every company recognized that, those specifically that were up there talking to the folks in North Dakota, it's got to fill a need. A lot of conversation was, we don't want more paper. We don't need a more thorough PDF, more thorough printout, more pages of JSA. We don't need that. But so to answer your question, Chuck, I think what it's going to look like is a incredibly efficient way to get information that matters most, the biggest safety risks, what we talked about specific to that job, on that rig, on that location, in that weather environment with that crew, that frankly meets the individual where they are. Are they a Spanish-speaking individual? Are they an English-speaking individual? Do they speak Portuguese? It'll meet them where they are. It'll have the ability for them to talk to it and talk back if they want it. It'll have the ability for them to see via via visual, via image, maybe potentially video on, hey, this is the injuries that occurred the last 5 times that this job went bad. I'll tell you, for me, if I was walking out to location, green hat, and I saw the risks in visual format, like that, I'm focused. I'm aware. How'd that happen? How do I make sure that doesn't happen? How do I protect the brothers around me? I think it'll include all that. I also think there was a number of different conversations around, if we think about, I'm not sure, don't mind me asking, quiz in the audience here. Who here utilizes, whether it's ChatGPT or others, that kind of interaction of only voice? Who utilizes that? How awesome is that? Talk about, like, that's going to save lives on the road, by the way, right? Just being able to utilize that. I do it almost every morning. Like, it helps me kind of work through things that I want to do for the day. And just, now imagine that is the crew driving out to location, getting all the information they need just right there in that windshield time. There's a lot of windshield time in our industry, right? the stats you see on that. And so I don't think we're ever going to get away from that all the way. We're going to do better. But now let's make that windshield time more effective, more efficient, right? We don't want people on their phone texting while they're driving, but if we could be interacting in a safe way, in a focused way. So I think all of that's going to be part of it. I think there's conversations, and it may not be in version 1, it may be in version 2 around cameras and the utilization of that. Now, not only are you taking all the legacy information and feeding that into this rig, but now, hey, visually, that's a risk, right? Like, I know we said stay out of the red zone, but that's a risk, right? Stop job authority to some extent flagging that. You mentioned earlier, no longer just answering questions, but predicting and offering solutions. So I think that probably gets beyond maybe the initial one, but man, it's just exciting. Sharon, you were talking about getting excited around where you think it may go. Like there was a lot of positive energy in that conversation last week as well.
Very, very cool. What was something during this process that totally surprised you? Something you didn't expect going in?
I think that I wasn't surprised by the passion from everybody involved, because once again, the ones that were involved were because they had passion. I wasn't surprised ultimately at how awesome that all the companies were able to develop something in a short period of time, because like I said, you guys being one, y'all say you can do stuff fast. Maybe what I was a little surprised by was some of the field interaction feedback and some of the things. I think, Colin, you even mentioned that, some ideas you guys had going into it and talking to the folks in the field, like, okay, that if it's not something they're going to use, it doesn't matter. So like maybe just in general, like trying to find and navigate what really is going to be a useful tool. We all can sit in corporate offices and be like, this is fantastic. They're going to love this. Why wouldn't they love this? But ultimately, if it's not something that makes someone's life easier, meets them where they are, it won't matter. So I think maybe just some of the interaction of that conversation was a little surprising to me, but both in the challenging side of that, but also in the opportunity side of that as well.
Interesting. Anybody got any questions? Because I can go on questions all day about this, but definitely anyone from the audience got a question? So I'll keep going then.
I got some cool stuff I want to show here too whenever you want.
Yeah, so Nick, where's Nick? Oh, right there. So Nick, can you you got slides up here. So
Go past. What I want to do real fast here, you guys know Continental, that's not a big deal. But it's a big deal to me, but you guys know us. I just wanted to show a few things here because I think this is so cool. Like when I think about the people in this room, you're here for a reason because you see the power, the passion in AI and like what it can do for our industry. So stop real fast there. Okay, this real quick. This is when I started my career. For those who are working in this industry 20-ish years ago, EIA, right, is like the foremost authority of all the information in the US and the globe on energy supply, energy demand. This was our current production in 2003. US, 5.9 million barrels of oil a day, 56 BCF a day of gas, okay? Now look at 2024. Go to the next one if you don't mind, bud. That's what they forecasted. That was their 20-year forecast. That was going to be the production from the US in 2024. A decline of 10% in oil, and an increase, a significant portion on gas. This is tight gas sands, for those who remember. That's what I started my career doing, was drilling tight gas wells, right? We're popping everything up and down the column. This is the Wolfberry, Sprayberry, some of that stuff, right? This is all the tight gas sands. Now, this is what actually happened. Like, we missed it so bad. Every bright mind in the world missed it so bad. Look at that. 13.2 million a day versus 5.5. Almost tripled versus falling by 10%. And then the gas, it increased. But the cool thing about that gas story, for those who remember, LNG, that used to be an import story, right? Back then in 2003, we were going to build all these LNG facilities because we had, even though we forecasted 74 BCF a day gas production, the demand was going to be 90. And they got that right. Demand was about 90 last year.
Cheniere was a multi-billion-dollar company based on import capability.
Right? Yeah. Yeah, to your point, it took a long time, but the reality is that caused so much capital to have to be reversed and restructured, et cetera. But now we're exporting last year almost 15 BCF a day. One other thing I would make sure that everybody should know this, but it's so cool to me. Largest producer in the world of oil is country. United States. 13.2 million. No country has ever produced that much we have. Largest gas producer in the world is US. 103 BCF a day. No country in the history of the world has ever done that before. No country's ever done both before, I don't believe either. And look at this, that's 20 years. Look at what changed in 20 years. Like, if y'all don't realize that, we live in a moment in an industry that has changed the world more than it's ever been done. This has never happened in the history of the world. 20-year period, the world has dynamically changed this much by one country. That to me is so powerful and so cool. And that was technology advancements that we've all been around. And you go back before this, and now we got .com and internet and stuff like that, and we were leveraging that throughout the way. But AI, what is that going to do? If you don't mind, one more thing to show, and then we can
Let me cut in one point here, just because we talk about this a lot on the podcast. I always say to everyone I meet, particularly Silicon Valley folks, we are technologically more sophisticated than any other industry on the planet when it's a game changer, when it's a lottery ticket, when you can make a fortune on something. So drilling down 3 miles horizontally, doing a 97 stage frac because you can drill a 1 million barrel well. We'll go figure that out. That's tough to do. We do that really well. If it's nickels and dimes, digitize our land files so we don't have 12 clerks running around. We don't do that. We don't do nickels and dimes. And at least what I've seen from the industry so far when we're out talking about AI, the industry is viewing AI as that lottery ticket. And so I actually think 5 years from now, when we're doing this thing, we're going to be talking about the best AI companies on the planet or utilizers of AI. It's going to be the energy business because of this chart you just showed.
Well, yeah.
One, I appreciate you showing this chart and showing that snapshot from 2003 to 2024. This is something I talk about often is that, if you look at energy demand projections from the EIA going out to 2050, they're flat. And that was until about, a year ago with the rise of high performance computing. What I've always said is that energy demand actually has the potential to increase infinitely. I mean, you look at electrification, high performance computing, emerging nations, space colonization, things of this nature. And so you see this step change here. And what my belief is that AI is a material step change to get us to that next level to where we have the ability to scale energy. And so my belief is just that AI is going to allow us to increase throughput and bandwidth to meet the world's energy demand. And I think that the biggest crisis that the world faces is an energy crisis. And it's everyone in this room and in this industry that's going to solve that. But I've never really looked at it historically in that snapshot from 2003 to 2024. And so it's cool seeing it historically. And one thing I know about EIA is that their projections are going to be wrong moving forward as well, one way or another. So thanks for showing us that slide.
Well, and obvious if the Permian were a country, what number would we be in the world?
Are we 4? I saw you do the 4. Yeah.
You know what we are on gas, or you know what the Texas as a state is on gas? 3. If it were a country, Texas is 3rd in the world, just behind the U.S. and Russia.
Well, and the one other thing I'll say, and I'll be a little dramatic here, but I truly believe this: the race for AI is existential threat type stuff. The United States has to win this. China cannot win this race. And ultimately, at the end of the day, the way we win it is the people in this room delivering energy. I really believe that. And I hate to be dramatic, but I think that's going to be true. So,
yeah, I think that we can touch on that for a second if you guys want to. But bottom line is, what is the limiting factor for AI? As you said, Colin, it's energy. That's the only real limiting factor. Now, building it is a limiting factor, and we got challenges on trade skills and others to be able to do that. Electricians, if you guys have young folks who want to do something besides college, electricians is going to be gold for the next probably 20 years. But yeah, maybe if you, one other thing here. So if this, you go past that, Colin, you talk about being wrong. Hold on, this is fun. This is a really cool article. I can send it around if y'all want it. This was talking about how bad we are at predicting future energy demand and energy supply for that matter. Peak oil, who's heard of peak oil? Over 100 years, the brightest minds in the United States have been calling for peak oil. This is a cool thing. In 2007, they opened up a time capsule from 1957 that residents of Tulsa, Oklahoma put in. They put in a Plymouth Belvedere, and they said, you know what, we should put some gasoline in there as well, because it won't be there. Like, there'll be no gas for this car in 50 years, right? And then if you go through this, I'll go through it all, but these next few slides are basically talking about articles from 1909, 1919, 43, keep going, 45. All of these are basically articles highlighting best minds of the time. Peak oil in 5 years, it's been hit. And then if you go down, like, okay, well, we're not doing that stupid stuff today, are we? This one's talking about, there's another one from 2007, but here, these quotes here, I blocked the names out. Those are energy executives of public companies today talking about peak oil. Like, oh, it's happening next year, 18 months. Okay, so my point is, and this is kind of ChatGPT saying, while U.S. oil production has reached impressive heights, the peak is imminent, and future growth will require substantial investment in innovation. That last line, of course it will. It always has, and we always have. So,
well, I was going to say, it was really funny when we were raising Energy Fund 8, call it circa 2018. That's kind of the height of Tesla mania, and nobody's going to need oil in 10 years. I gave a speech where I got up there and I said, hey, I want to read some quotes from the New York Times. Electric vehicles are sexy. Electric vehicles poised to take over the market. 12 other quotes like that. And then I get up and I give the speech about how many cars are on the road, how many of those cars will still be on the road in 10 years, how much oil demand that'll lead to, et cetera. And I went through all those stats and basically said, at the end of the day, oil demand's still going to grow. And then I said, thank you very much. And I get this smattering of applause, and I take 2 steps away, and then I come back to the mic and I go, oh, by the way, those New York Times headlines I read are from 1917, 1918, 1919. This has been going on for 100 years. Yeah.
Awesome. Maybe last thing, and I said it twice now. So this, pause right there. Okay. Unless somebody knows something I'm not aware of, every energy source in the world requires mining. Okay? Whether it is our industry extracting hydrocarbons from the ground, whether it is coal, whether it is precious metals, lithium, copper for batteries, for solar voltaic, you name it, right? Windmills, everything requires mining to the materials, the inputs to generate energy, electricity. These are a list of various energy sources, and the recovery factor, essentially, when you mine that raw product or those tools needed, those components, how much do you actually get out of the ground? All right? Green being get a lot of it, 95%, 90%. Red being pretty poor, like less than 20%, 15.5. Who knows where oil and gas is? Top 2, oil and gas? Like we get all of it out? 15%? Go to the next slide. Natural gas and crude, all right? So even though we are, as an industry, producing more oil and more natural gas than the world has ever seen. So we're doing it better, by definition, than anybody has in the history of the world. We are only getting less than 20% of the actual known quantified products out of the ground. Is that an efficient industry? What's the opportunity? AI, I think, will have a massive opportunity for us, because this is a challenge that is hard. All right, I'm a reservoir engineer by background. This is a hard challenge. There's a reason for this, but the opportunity is so large. Now, one person I showed this to is like, well, but if you're mining coal or you're getting lithium and stuff at surface, like that's easy. That's like strip mining. You can see it, you can touch it. Copper, not on here, but the copper industry gets over 90% recovery, and that's mining. The deepest copper mine in the world? Over 2 miles, right? A lot of wells. The Wilson, my team, for example, is 2 miles down roughly before we go out 3-4 miles. But the deepest copper mine in the world is over 2 miles in South Africa, and essentially they're still getting over 90% recovery. Okay, so there is ways to do it. We got to figure it out. But that is to me so powerful about how we're going to meet that energy demand of the future and what AI can do for us to continue to provide abundant, affordable, essentially energy that we're going to need if we're going to win that AI race.
Can I add to that real quick? So I was sitting with the CEO of Diamondback last week, Yates, and Yates is amazing. We're talking about this as well, is you look at the recovery factors in oil and gas, and you look at the things that we have accomplished in this industry. You know, speaking of old articles and quotes, there's this Time magazine article from like 1943 talking about how the Permian Basin will never be economically viable because of the capital investment that would be needed. And you look at those things and it's just funny in hindsight. And, you know, we always look at technology as some abstract thing. Like technology is actually just a creation of humans and we can solve any problem that we want. So you look at the produced water problems that we have, you look at the recovery factor problems that we have. I mean, we will figure out all of these problems because this industry is full of smart people and we'll throw capital at those problems to figure it out. But I think that AI is that material step change that will help us figure these problems. Like, I think AI helps across all industries. Like, I think it'll help us solve medical, you know, maybe potentially cancer, things of this nature. And so, as Chuck mentioned earlier, I think that it's this lottery ticket that'll help us figure these things out. When you tell people that we recover less than 5% of oil from a reservoir, like they don't fucking believe that. Like when people start talking about peak oil and you start talking about how we leave 95% of it in the ground, like it blows people's minds. And so this is actually the biggest opportunity that I see. And, you know, I think AI will also increase margin in oil and gas companies. It'll make operations more economic. You know, obviously underlying commodity prices can be a force function of unlocking different things as well. And so this is probably the most interesting macro thing to me in energy is if we can solve that problem.
We don't hear about it enough either. Like this, to me, is something we should do a better job in our industry of explaining, because then for every young individual who's being told that's not an industry worth going into, just like I was 25 years ago, it's a dying industry. Why are you going to do that? Do you like to travel? Because all the work's going to be overseas, right? What language do you speak besides English? We need to make sure the story is known, the opportunity is there, and that we apply the resources towards it. Because I'll frankly tell you, like, you know, you think about enhanced oil recovery technologies. We've done that for a long time in conventional reservoirs. It is so early stages in unconventionals. I think we're one of the leading companies doing it. We're doing it across 3 different basins, but it is early stage, it is difficult, and it's hard to justify capital allocation towards it. But frankly, it's a huge, huge opportunity.
I got a question for you on that. We're in the infancy of that technology. What's your mindset? You know, earlier you were talking about this competitive industry, but you know what this industry really lacks behind the tech industry is this open source, collaborative mindset. This is actually what I appreciate what you guys are doing with LifesAIver is collaborating and sharing information and solving these problems. You know, it's funny, Chuck and I were sitting in a private equity fund one time and they're talking about how competitive the industry is and like, oh, we can't be sharing information. And I looked at them and I said, hey, how much capital did y'all burn trying to figure out well spacing? And they just looked at each other and all smirked. It's like, imagine if the industry was actually sharing information on best practices. How do you view that as running operations at Continental and admittedly in a competitive atmosphere environment? Do you think that there's advantage, you know, do all boats rise with the tide if we're helping each other and sharing information on some of these enhanced oil recovery techniques and things of this nature, and making sure, you know, one thing that I think is an interesting dynamic of this is like, look, we chewed through some of our best rock with the first versions of fracking, right? And you know, if we had better frac designs and completion processes, we could have extracted more oil out of those. So there's also a kind of national security and sovereignty dynamic here of, you know, we're stewards of making sure that we extract all the resources that we have and providing that for American citizens. And so what's your thoughts on that of where the industry should be at in terms of helping each other, sharing information, while also realizing that it's a competitive business as well?
Yeah, I think it's a challenge. I think it's I think we do it in certain forms and fashions better than others. I think what you highlighted there, you know, the beauty of capitalism is kind of what is going to lead to some of those things of inefficiency in early stage things we do. But I think that, back to the LifesAIver project, that's what we started with safety, because we kind of take that fierce competition out of it. I think that each opportunity is going to maybe be unique. EOR is so early on, and the capital dollars are significant. I think you're still going to have, depends on if you can find, there's some things that are consortiums, there's some things that are getting involvement from whether it be state or federal. Like those ones are going to have more sharing because that's the definition of them, right? You're sharing resources to go fund it. So in general, maybe my answer to your question, Colin, is if you've got vested interest in the input, then you've got collective vested input there. You're going to have collective vested input in the outputs. If it's one company or two companies taking the risk, then they're probably going to have to hold that tight, because what's the benefit of them taking that risk?
I actually, and I may be a little Pollyanna on things, I honestly think a lot of the things we're building, people are going to be willing to contribute their data, let it be anonymized, in effect for a discount on the software. Joseph and I have talked a lot about this. We're going to go build well failure bot, and it'll be interesting to see, do we turn that into collaboration? Because I do think the more information in that bot is going to lead to better predictives, better outcomes, etc. And I think the mindset, when you really think about it, is, am I truly arbitraging and making money because I can put wells back online faster? Probably not. And so do I share? So I think that's going to be a fascinating part of building all these tools, because we saw it with Bill Van Gotten back in the shale revolution. Bill took everybody's logs and he gave you an answer, and he told you he had all the logs, and if you contributed, he would use your logs, your EURs, etc., but he wouldn't disclose what he had. But wink, wink, nod, nod, you kind of knew what he had. So I do think there's models for it out there in our industry, and I'm optimistic.
I'm optimistic too on the site. I think, once again, it depends on, you said it a minute ago, on well work. If the arbitrage opportunity for incremental value creation by being an early mover isn't that large, that's where we should start, those opportunities. If it's early days of shale technology, shale revolution, when there's tens of millions of acres to go be captured, right? And there's a lot of upside to somebody who has a thesis sooner on, like those are going to be the harder things, I think. But that's part of, once again, I think it's capitalism.
Yeah, absolutely. My dad's best friend is a Methodist minister, and he preached at a really small church. And so periodically when he would go out of town, he asked my dad to come give the sermon. And first time my dad did it, he was really nervous, and he goes, Joe, I need some advice. What do I do? And he goes, oh, hell, it's pretty easy. Just get done in time so you beat the Baptists to the cafeteria. At the risk of delaying cocktail hour another 5 minutes, does anybody have any questions? Because I've got one last one.
Yes. So, John, my background is all software. Oil and gas is lights, micros, speeds, everything. You mentioned also mentioned that AI can be this job proportion. Help me understand how. What exactly is it about AI that would make this job? Yeah.
I think that, good question. I think specifically when we talk about recovery factor, we have imperfect information underground. Pick your shale play, which the majority of our natural resources, our reserves, are shales at this point. We have maybe a data point every mile, maybe every 5 miles, maybe every 10 miles. Not a lot of companies these days are logging wells because they don't need to, right? So ultimately, that imperfect information you're dealing with creates a massive challenge. Now that's just on characteristics of the rock, lithology, thickness, whatever. Now on top of that, pressure, temperature, overall conditions of that now changing in, called the fourth dimension, over time. So there's so much we do not know. I think I've heard before, we know more about the surface of the moon than we do about our reservoirs, right? That's just because we sample it so infrequently. So the challenge is massive from a just lack of direct measurement. We have a lot of empirical evidence. We have a lot of things we're capturing every single day. I think the sheer challenge of that, though, is that it's just so much information, right? Pressure information, sometimes companies are taking every second or every minute on every single well. Like, that's a lot of data. To me, what encouraged me so much about AI is now you have a tool to leverage that, to tackle that. It was never going to be tackled, or we weren't going to get to it very quickly using even very, very bright minds, and we're blessed to have some of the brightest minds in the world in this industry. So just that sheer compute power, that opportunity to interact with it in a much, much faster. This is kind of a dumb comment, but I remember biz development 10 years ago, Continental, we used to use Excel to its fullest extent, where we overloaded the capacity of Excel on a local machine, right? So now we went from having to run models at midnight and then go home and hope that it didn't make an error, and get back at 7, 8 in the morning and be so pissed off if it had an error, right? Then we went to, well, let's run it on the cloud. All right, before the cloud, it was a series of machines, and then it was cloud. And then, but today, with technology, just the compute power, that stuff that we were waiting 10, 12 hours to find out there's an error, that's in seconds. That's a decade ago. So that encourages me the most, just the compute power, the opportunity to tackle these challenges with this amount of data that has been so onerous for us in the past.
John, your comment on we know more about the surface of the moon than our reservoirs. So I was on an offshore rig, Shell Perdido, and that's what Shell's R&D team out of the Netherlands. And one of the head scientists, we were running this new NW downhole, and he's a PhD in astrophysics and aerospace engineering. I'm sitting there with him in the galley, eating with him one day. I'm like, what the fuck are you doing in oil and gas? Why are you not working on space travel and rockets? And he's like, dude, space is boring. You can see what you're working on. He's like, oil and gas, you can't see what you're working on. It's so much more interesting. And so that was always a really, that'll stick in my mind forever. But that reminded me of becoming the world. So
one of the things kind of off what you're saying on why is it like that and how I can help. So I'm a reservoir engineer, my background, and in the reservoir down 2 miles, whatever depth you're at, you've got oil, you've got gas, and you got water. And it's at the source rock, and it's fractured, and it's not, and it's about what's movable, right? And so one of the most nebulous things for any reservoir engineer that's ever done a simulation is what is relative permeability, which is what's the ability of water to flow over oil or oil to flow over water. And it's so nebulous. It's so hard to figure out. If we get to a point where we can leverage the data, because it's going to be very specific to that particular situation in that rock with all the data you've got. If we can figure out how to make the oil and gas move relative to the water with either chemicals or fracking or whatever, if we can start figuring out that relative perm issue, then you'll start making an incremental change there. And that requires, because anytime you've ever run a reservoir simulation, you can make those numbers. It is a non-unique solution in a massive way. But I think that could be one way to make a little bit of change there that AI can help.
Yeah, I mean, it's ultimately pattern recognition. And I think the way we think about it here at Collide is there are kind of 3 legs to the stool. There's big tech and all the tools they're creating, language models, et cetera. Somebody's got to be an expert in that and know what they can do, can't do at any given moment. That's kind of our job. You got to translate it to speak energy. And you saw John earlier today talking about data and not the insignificant problem of running things through data pipelines and figuring that out. That's our job. But the subject matter expertise is our clients. Tom, you're going to tell me, hey, go out there and find a log that has this signature on it. It's got this production profile, because I have figured out that they have messed up the frac on that. And if you can find me a big enough area, we can go in and do refracs or whatever the case may be. And my job is to give you the tools to go do that.
And what's going to show it is in the Bakken. On this part of the Bakken, it's going to be this answer. In the Permian, it's going to be a totally different answer. Exactly. Appalachia is going to be a different answer. It's going to be very unique to that situation. Yeah. So in that way, it's kind of like the LifesAIver thing. It has to be specific to that. It's the way to get that incremental edge. Yeah, that's a cool idea.
I totally want to drink, but I can't let you go. I need a cool Harold Hamm story. This is hero boy worshiping here, so give me a cool one.
Oh man, there are a lot of cool Harold stories. He's a phenomenal, American. I'll say for those who haven't read his book, I'd highly encourage it. Game Changer. He is the most. I don't know that many billionaires. I think in our industry, we're fortunate to be around a few of them that are very humble people. Harold is the most humble billionaire, I'm sure, by far in the globe. He's the youngest of 13 sharecroppers. If you all don't know what sharecroppers are, that is like as poor as you could be when he was born almost 80 years ago. But when you think about one story that always stood out to me, so Harold, he kind of grows up, gets to oil and gas service side. He always had the passion and the vision, and talks about it in his book, of wanting to be an operator. He wanted to be essentially a geologist, to know where the oil is. How do you find where it is? And then, so fast forward, he's a young father, his kids, he's running a successful business, trucking business in the industry. He's doing that, however many, 18 hours a day. While his kids are asleep, he has a small office off the side of his bedroom, and he is going to the Oklahoma City Log Library. Who knows what a log library is? Okay. Check out, like it sounds, you check out logs, like you check out books at a library. He's going to Oklahoma City Log Library to check out logs because he had an idea about a trend in the Anadarko Basin. And so he starts mapping between the hours of whatever and whatever while his kids are sleeping. I don't know if he's ever sleeping. And then he puts together this, and he goes out, he gets himself the confidence of it. He doesn't go raise money by anybody. He goes out and starts buying individual wells that he believes have behind pipe pay in that zone. And then frankly, through his own mapping, his own money, his own risk, he ends up putting together a very, very successful recompletion program. He's buying these wells for X, PDP value at the time, whatever that may be, spending the money to go out there and pop them, and everyone after that is just more confidence, and he's buying more, then he's buying more. And frankly, that was the origin story, if you will, of Continental Resources. That was Shelley Dean Oil Company. So his two oldest daughters, Shelley and Dina. It's, to me, I can still imagine him doing that at night, mapping in his bedroom.
That's so cool. Hey, John, appreciate you coming down.